You did it. Okay, thank you, Beth. And good day, everyone. We've got folks coming from a lot of different towns in Wisconsin, and just a brief, and Illinois. I wanted to give a shout out to Illinois. I might have missed some other states, but welcome to Search Inside Yourself from the Leadership Institute. And just the brief history is that this is a Google-born leadership program, and we're a nonprofit, and we're really offering mindfulness-based trainings and emotional intelligence trainings in partnership with communities that work on the front lines of society, nonprofits, education, universities, public servants, mental health workers. So for our purposes, what we'd like to invite you to begin to think about is leadership as how we behave and how we relate. So we're going to be talking about our behavior today, and specifically wondering, are we behaving in ways that help us connect and inspire, or are we behaving in ways that cause disconnection and deplete people's energy? Okay. So are we lifting people up, or are we weighing people down? So that is how we think of leadership. It is regardless of whether you have a title attached to your name. We don't need to worry about that. We need to worry about how we walk through the world, how we show up in the world. And one of the ways that we build relationships and connect and inspire is through communication. And so we're going to start off right away with putting you into breakout rooms. Beth is feverishly working to put folks in breakout rooms in pairs. And when you get into your breakout rooms, you'll just be talking about these two prompts. What do you love about your work or your role currently? And what are some challenges? And this will be a free flow conversation. And just notice sometimes you're speaking and sometimes you're listening. This will be our first of two conversation communication practices today. If all goes well, when you get into your breakout room, you will see this slide that will let you know how much time is left. And again, free flow back and forth. What are you loving about your role or your work, and what are some challenges? Okay. And I will look to my program manager, Beth, and see if we're ready to go. Yep, she's still working on breakout rooms. I see. And thank you, thank you in advance for your grace around technology. And as people come in, Beth, we can just put them into rooms. So why don't we hit go with where we are now? Yeah, see, they keep coming. So.
Okay, so does it look like people are in rooms?
Yeah, I say hit go and see what happens. Let me see. Breakout rooms, I see, yep. And you know what we can do? Yeah, go ahead. Let's hit go.
Okay, so I did hit go. Does it look like it's doing anything?
Our folks, yep. Yeah. And so I'm just going to assign Samantha to room 1. And I'm going to assign, Renee. Is Renee our Renee?
Our Renee, yes.
Okay.
I can be in your room, Beth, if you want to do the activity.
I think we're in the main room here.
Okay.
You're going to stay here. I'm going to try to share my screen.
Good job, Beth. There's only 3 of us left here.
Okay. Well, I think Stacey added the other incoming person, so thanks, Stacey.
Perfect.
Well, Renee, if you want to just answer those 2 questions, because this is being recorded.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you love about your work or role? I think my favorite part about my work, and I will go with my work for my career right now, the fire department, I'm a firefighter paramedic, is the dynamic nature of the challenges. I'm not a person that can handle monotony very well. So I think the fact that my job allows me to face something quite literally very different every day is very enticing to me. And then what are some biggest challenges? I think for me, it could honestly be the same answer. It's sometimes challenging to not know what your workday is going to look like. And I think maybe for me, the bigger challenge is just the diversity of perspective in specifically my line of work, the fire service. There's a lot of different personality types and a lot of people that are witch type A people, I feel like, and that creates a lot of challenges for power struggles or, teamwork, collaboration. So I think that would probably be my biggest challenge.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to let Beth know that she can share if she'd like to. She might be preoccupied with, yeah.
Hey, Renee, where are you a firefighter?
La Crosse, Wisconsin for the
Oh,
city.
very cool.
Yeah.
Very a bunch. I played rugby, and we've got like 5 all out in LA, like Oakland,
sure.
and they're on the fire team. What you guys do is amazing.
Yeah, thank you. It's a fun career.
It's an awesome career.
Yeah.
Hi, Stacey.
Hi, is this Kendra?
It is Kendra. I got put in a breakout room by myself, so I came back to the big one.
Oh, good.
I mean,
Hi.
I can talk to
It's good
myself
see
all day,
you.
but good to see you.
Oh, there you are. I wasn't seeing everyone. I'm distracted by my timer not working in the breakout room. So
It's all good.
it's good to see you. I'm glad you could come. We'll
Of
see you
course.
after
I
practice.
had to leave my office because we have an exploding kid. So I'll go. I love my job. It's much like you, Renee. So I am a principal at a therapeutic day school.
Pretty busy with that, I would say, as well.
It's pretty busy. And we have a lot of kids coming to us out of like incarceration right now, as well as hospitalization. And so every day looks really different. And I think some of my biggest challenges is you think the adults in a building like this would take care of each other, right? And really be part of the mindset and practice around skill, not will. And these behaviors and a lot of the things we see come from not kids choosing to wake up and be assholes this morning, but really kids.
I'll just let you know, Kendra, that we're all back now. So everyone's hearing
Okay.
you.
Oh, good. Great. Hi. Anyways, I'll stop talking.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I don't want to cut you off, but I do want to be mindful of the time and welcome everyone. I'm sure in your breakout rooms, thank you for your grace around the technology. I see that my timer did not work. I'll try to fix that for our next breakout room. But as we are aware that our jobs are double-edged swords here, we have many things we love about our jobs, and then there are quite some real challenges. And before we dive into what we're going to do today, I want to take a moment to introduce you to our first practice called A Minute to Arrive. And that is simply acknowledging that in our busy lives, coming from these robust conversations, having these mornings that you've already lived, we can arrive at a meeting or a meal or a conversation physically. We can be physically present, but our minds can be elsewhere. And so this is a practice you're invited to share. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see each other, just to get us to fully arrive. And we'll use the tool of attention. We live in an attention economy. There's only so much that we each have. So this practice is inviting us to use the tool of attention and see if it shifts how we're feeling, our thoughts and our emotions even. So I'll guide us through. Just to begin with, if you'd like to explore getting your feet on the ground, being aware of your feet. I scooted up from my chair a little bit just to feel myself seated on the chair. Notice the sensation of the chair holding you. You can roll your shoulders back if you'd like, relax any amount. You can relax your jaw if you'd like. And we'll shine the light of our attention on an anchor point. One anchor point I'll offer is your breath. So take a deep breath in. Sometimes we constrict our breathing, we don't even know it. How do you know you're breathing? What sensation do you feel in your body? If you would like to use the sensation of breathing, you can focus your attention there for the next minute or so. If focusing on breath is uncomfortable, I offer you the sensation of touch. You can put your hands together and just feel the sensation of touch. That's a second anchor point. A third anchor point is sound. I'm going to stop talking in a moment, just cluing into the sound in your environment. So resting your awareness, paying attention on purpose to one of those anchors, your breath, sound, or touch for the next 30 seconds or so. And when you're ready, if your eyes are closed, you can open your eyes or raise your gaze, stretch if that feels good to you. And just notice for yourself if just that brief time and space to pay attention shifted anything for you, okay? And know that going forward, that is an exercise, a practice that we can bring into our meetings, into our conversations to really fully be present with each other. Okay. So thank you for your practice. I'm going to share my screen again. And hello, I'm going to do a little bit more of an introduction. My name is Stacey Crowley. I'm coming from Asheville, North Carolina. I want to acknowledge that this is the land of the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Nation. And I've been working with emotional intelligence and social emotional learning since 2004. And in 2003, I was working as a speech language pathologist in Chicago Public Schools when Illinois passed the Children's Mental Health Act. And then in 2004, Illinois adopted the first social emotional learning standards in the country. Raise your hand if you've heard of social emotional learning, or SEL. Well, it was new. Illinois was the first state to adopt it. And I was trained to teach social emotional learning, or emotional intelligence, same, to children. To kindergartners, in fact. And on the day that I taught anger to kindergartners, I taught them what it's called, different words to describe anger, where we feel it in our body, what might make us angry, and then how to peacefully problem solve after we calm ourselves down. On that day that I taught anger to 5- and 6-year-olds, I had therapy with Jim. And I brought the lesson to Jim because I had been with him for years, both in individual and group counseling, because I was struggling with relationships. I was struggling with personal relationships. I was struggling with collegial relationships. There was a specific colleague of mine, we could not get along. Our relationship was not collaborative, to say the least. I was struggling with all these relationships. I brought Jim this lesson plan and said, would you look at this? Would you read this and let me know if this is what you and I have been working on? And he read it and he said, yeah, Stacey, it's what you and I have been working on. I had big ahas that day for 2 reasons. Number one, how incredibly helpful would it have been to learn these relationship skills, these social emotional learning skills when I was 5? It would have changed the trajectory of my whole life. And how happy was I that we are now teaching this to children? Number two, I realized I wasn't broken. I just hadn't been taught. And so it is thrilling for me to bring this to you because now we know so much more about building relationships through this work, and we can bring it into our lives as adults, even though we didn't learn it as children. So Search Inside Yourself has this recipe. We look at emotional intelligence, the very trainable, learnable skills of emotional intelligence. And we also look at the neuroscience, what we know now about the human nervous system. We have the best brain science we've ever had. It's still in its infancy, so we're very humble about it, but we know so much more than we ever have. So we look at neuroscience and we look at the tool of mindfulness, what mindfulness can do for us when we pay attention on purpose, opening up the possibilities for cultivating emotional intelligence. So that is the recipe of Search Inside Yourself. The full program is a 2-day program. We do it live and we do it online now, but that's the recipe. And the creators really collaborated with thought partners and researchers from all of these domains to make this robust program. Raise your hand if you're familiar with this book by Dan Goleman. In the mid-90s, yeah, this was a revolutionary book. He's the first guy that said, hey, intellectual capacity is great, but EI is really important for well-being. And I was a perfectionist type A type of person, I'm recovering, and was always very, very focused on the intellectual capacity. But this opened up something for me, emotional intelligence. So you see here these 4 domains that Goldman puts out for us. And there's something interesting. If we look at the top 2 domains, what word do we see in both of these circles? Self. Emotional intelligence is intrapersonal first. We work intrapersonally, and then we can move to interpersonally, these bottom 2 circles. There's also some theme if we look at left versus right. If you look at the leftmost circles, what do you notice? The word awareness. Emotional intelligence starts with awareness. We need clarity. And whether it's for ourselves or other people, we want this awareness because then we can move into this other side of management. So we're going to be looking a little bit at self-awareness and social awareness today as an introduction. But before we move on, something that's interesting, whether you have your own children in schools, in public schools or private schools, K-12 right now, or you're teaching in those schools, there's a framework that comes from the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning that I've put here, this wheel. Notice the similarities between these domains. At all ages and stages of life, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management, same skills that we need. And I have the good fortune of teaching these skills to children, families, and adults in trainings. So why do we need this? Let's ask this question. Why EI? Why now? Well, raise your hand if this resonates with anyone. In our long human history, never before have we been asked to deal with so much information. We're living in the digital age. The 21st century is the information age. And quite frankly, our nervous system did not evolve to deal with all of the information that comes at us on a daily basis. We have another appendage now, and we are constantly connected to it. We're not equipped for it. On a broader scale, the society that we live in, our world that we live in, can be defined or described with these descriptors. It's volatile, it's uncertain. Our world is complex and it is ambiguous right now. This is VUCA, is the acronym. A VUCA world that we live in comes from the military to describe the battlefield. Raise your hand if any one, at least one of these words, resonates with you to describe our world. We're living in pandemic. We have systemic racism. We have polarizing tribal politics. Yes, I see hands raised. Climate change. Our nervous systems are not equipped to deal with global concerns being fed to us through information channels 24 hours a day. And what we know is that there's a lot of mental health struggle right now. So Beth is about to launch a poll asking us to consider, if you know someone, it could be yourself or someone else. Do you know someone who lives with anxiety, depression, or another mental health challenge right now? And so we should see a poll momentarily. There it is. Yeah. And we'll share these results as they come in, or when they come in. We've got 31 folks here. Yeah, go ahead, Beth. Go ahead and share the results. Okay, 100% of us are familiar with someone who's struggling. It's either ourselves or someone else. Before the pandemic, the World Health Organization shared that mental health illness was the #1 reason for disability around the globe. We know 1/3 of our college freshmen are struggling with a mental health challenge. That was before the pandemic. So this is a real issue that we need to think about for ourselves and in our workplaces. Now, not only are we dealing with mental health challenge, living in the digital age, in a VUCA world, it impacts our health, our mental health. It also is very distracting. We're very distracted. In fact, 47% of leaders, of people rather, let me go back up. we spend 47% of our time, roughly, mind wandering. This was a really cool research study. I'm not going to go into it, but that is profound. Let's think about that with some simple math. If we live to be 90 years old, and we know that we sleep for a third of our lives, right? So, okay, we're sleeping for 30 years. So now we have 60 waking years, and we spend almost half of that time distracted. That means I'm going to shave off another 30 years and recognize that I'm only fully aware of what's happening in the moment presently for 30 years, but I'm alive for 90, right? It's a profound consideration that our distraction keeps us from being fully present and aware of what's happening. 70% of leaders say they're regularly unable to be attentive in meetings. Their attention is pulling them elsewhere. And only 2% of leaders actually make time to enhance their personal productivity. So what does all this distractibility mean? How does it look in our lives? The result is that we live in something called autopilot, right? Autopilot, habitual way of acting. We're motoring through our days. We're checking this repeatedly, often, and there are traits to being an autopilot. You might notice one of these traits is personal for you. So raise your hand if any one of these traits rings true for you. Your attention's in the past or the future. You're replaying a conversation. You're making plans for your next email. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Andy. We're distracted. We've got bells and whistles and vibrations here. Thank you, Adrian. We're less aware of what's happening, what's going on in the moment, which means that someone's sitting across from us talking to us, and we're less aware of what they're saying, what they're feeling, right? And we get into these habits of acting on habits, on patterns and assumptions. So these autopilot way of being in the world can really inform how we behave. And what we want to know is that autopilot's not the only way to be. We can make choices about our behavior if we are aware. And for this, we look at the inspiration of Viktor Frankl. This was also a quote that was used in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, one of my heroes. But what Viktor shares with us, and Viktor is a Holocaust survivor, and he studied human behavior in the concentration camp. And he recognized that, oh, the people who are surviving are making use of space choice. And his quote is simply, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in this space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our freedom and our growth. So what we want to do is have the power to choose how we behave, right? Are we behaving to connect with people and inspire? Are we behaving in ways that disconnect and push people down? So, all right, sounds great. How do we do it? How do we get off autopilot and move into choice? And the answer that we're sharing with you is mindfulness. And we can think of mindfulness as a mental exercise. I teach mindfulness to children as well as adults. My students right now range from 5 years old to 75 years old, which is pretty fun. But mindfulness, I like to teach with these 4 descriptors, these 4 attributes. It's paying attention on purpose to the present moment with kindness. And I'll give a shout out to one of my teenage students on the autism spectrum who came up with this graphic. But thinking about that, our attention is a resource. We only have so much of it, but we can pay attention on purpose to the present moment with kindness. And if we do that exercise, what we build is the capacity to be aware of what's going on in the moment. What are my thoughts and feelings? What's going on around me, right? So a really simple way to think about mindfulness is a tool that we use, a mental exercise to help us move from autopilot to aware. Simple, right? What we teach are 2 different ways to practice mindfulness. The first is kind of like going to the gym, a dedicated practice. You set aside a little bit of time to flex your attention. We already did this. Our minute to arrive was a dedicated mindfulness practice. We can do that. And I'm actually pretty curious to know who here, I'm going to stop sharing, who here has any type of mindfulness practice going on at the moment, even if it's sporadic, you can raise your hand. Yeah. Okay. Yep. I see some of us have it. I see some thumbs up. Yeah. So it sounds like some of us have this practice already. And for some of us, this might be really new. Who's heard of it in the news lately? Let's see hands for that. Mindfulness is getting a lot of attention. Yeah, thank you. And we're going to talk a little bit about why. What is so compelling about this? Okay, let me go back. Thanks for sharing, y'all. Okay. So we can choose to have a dedicated practice. We can learn this skill, this practice. And another way to practice is called an integrated practice or in the moment. And these are short, portable, accessible practices that you can weave into your daily life when you need them. And I'm going to share one right now. This is a micro practice called the 3 breaths practice. So this is you're transitioning from home to work. You're getting out of your car. You're sitting down at the dinner table. You're entering a meeting. How do you fully get present and ready to engage with the folks that you're with? We can do that in 3 breaths. And simply, I'll talk us through it and then I'll pause. The first is to pay attention to your breath. Notice the sensation of this life force coming into your body. Where do you feel it? Belly, chest, nose. Pay attention. Second breath, relax the body. Feel yourself in your body, rolling your shoulders, loosening your jaw, sitting in your chair. The third breath, asking the question, what's important now? What's important? Connecting with this person in front of me, answering this one email, right? So I'm going to pause for 3 breaths and just allow you to walk through this. And you might envision, I'm going to set you up with a visioning first. Envision a meeting or a gathering that you have later today. It can be a work meeting, or you're going to go home and have a meal with someone. And you're going to transition. And before you transition, you're going to pause outside of that room and take these 3 breaths, okay? So picture yourself in that space and go ahead and walk through these three steps. Paying attention to your breath, relaxing your body, asking what's important now. Okay. Good. And just keep that in your back pocket, because as we walk through our days, we motor through these days on autopilot, we have a choice to come back to the full present moment with this micro practice, okay? Okay. What's interesting about mindfulness is that it creates the space, it creates a pathway to build self-awareness. As Dan Goleman explained, self-awareness is the root of all the other emotional intelligence areas. When I'm teaching this to adults, whether it's in schools or nonprofits, it's the same as what I'm teaching for children, right? We need this awareness to be built on something. We can't just automatically be aware. So how do we manage ourselves, our relationships, if we don't have an awareness of what's going on? And Dan Goleman describes awareness, self-awareness, is just knowing our internal states, preferences, resources, intuitions. What he's saying here, really, internal states, what are the emotions that are here that's driving my behavior? Because emotions are always present, whether or not we recognize them or work with them. What emotions are here? What stories am I telling myself about other people or my own capacities, right? Really getting clarity around who we are and what is running underneath the surface of us. So mindfulness has a big piece to play in this, a big role to play. If we look at the studies that have been done since the early 90s, we see this hockey stick formation, this complete increase in mindfulness. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that the fMRI machine, raise your hand if you've ever heard of that, functional magnetic resonance imaging, we can look in the brain now. Thanks, Andy. We can look in the brain and see what's happening in a way that we couldn't before. So suddenly we can measure mindfulness. And something that the mindfulness research is really looking at is called neuroplasticity. Raise your hand if you've heard of neuroplasticity, right? This is, okay, a couple of us have heard. Neuroplasticity is the ability of our brain to change in structure and function based on what we think, do, and pay attention to. So all the learning you've done throughout your life has happened because your brain can change in structure and function based on what you think, do, and pay attention to. That's important. Notice the word pay attention to. When we pay attention on purpose to the present moment with kindness, when we use that exercise, we change the structure and function of our brain, and it turns out that it's really beneficial for us. So I'm going to share a couple studies with you that I think are interesting. One is looking at something called the default mode network. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see your faces. Okay, the default mode network. Raise your hand if you've heard of that before. This is kind of new. Yeah, okay, thanks, Sam. This is the network in our brain that is activated when we're thinking about number one, ourselves, right? We are the protagonist in our life story. And when we're distracted, we are thinking about our lives, what we have to do, the other people in our lives. We are pretty obsessed with ourselves as a species. So that network, that self-referential network, is activated when we're distracted. So a distracted mind, a wandering mind, is very often an unhappy mind. And so this one study, what they did is they looked at the default mode network and they wanted to know what the differences were between meditators and non-meditators in this default mode network. And what they found was that meditators had less activation of this default mode network when they were meditating. Not only when they were meditating, even when they weren't meditating. And they had greater connectivity with the attention management area of their brain. So that's significant because what that tells us is that if we are able to stay in this moment, right here, right now, it's mutually exclusive with worrying and ruminating, right? Those are two mutually exclusive states of being. This was powerful for me. Oh, if I train up the capacity to be in this moment, that makes sense. If I'm fully here, I can't be worrying about the past or the future. I can't be ruminating. So that was a big aha. That's a big finding. I'll stop sharing again so I can see some of your faces. And if you'd like to turn on your video, it's always nice to see faces if you're comfortable. Another study they did was looking at our pain response. And an example I like to give for this is having a shot. When I was a kid, I hated shots. Did anyone else hate shots as a kid? I see Laura going, even now, right? No one loves a shot. When we have physical pain, we have an alarm system that goes off in the brain, right? It's our safety net. We have this alarm system, our amygdala will go off when we have pain. I was a kid, I would have a shot on Friday. That's when the pain happened. My worry would start the week before. It's called, right, anticipatory stress. See, I see Sarah laughing, right? I would worry, worry, worry. I would have the shot on Friday. There was a moment of pain, and then I would have this negative reaction afterwards because I reflect on this thing that I went through, right? So this next study, what they did is they wanted to look at meditators. They looked at novice meditators versus expert meditators. What is the difference when they experience pain? What goes on in their brain? And what they found, let me get there, here's our next slide, is that the expert meditators, they registered pain. Of course they did. So their alarm system went off when there was pain, but they had less anticipatory stress. They weren't worried about it when they were getting shocked. I neglected to mention that these participants in this study were hooked up to a hot thermode and they were getting a series of hot zaps to the forearm over and over again. So as they were doing this, they were looking at their brains and they saw, you know what, the expert meditators, their amygdala, their alarm system activates when they're in pain, but then it drops back down. And it doesn't shoot up again. There's not activation until they get zapped again. That wasn't so for the novice meditators. They would have this increased anticipation, this increased alarm system just in waiting for the next shock. Also, the expert meditators had less unpleasantness that they reported afterwards. They weren't dwelling on the pain. So the big takeaway here is that pain in our life is inevitable. The suffering is optional. Learning to meditate, staying in this present moment can keep us from all that suffering that we bring on when we're worrying about something that's coming up or we're reflecting on something that's happened, okay? And the last just bit of information here is from the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute that has trained over 10,000 people in 20 different countries. And in 2022, there's a report that they release the reports often, to look at the pre and post reports of participants. And so participants who take the 2-day, we have a 2-day training, and then there's a 28-day challenge where we support continued practice, and then they re-survey participants. And they find these over and over again, really compelling shifts. The first is a shift in people actually using a deliberate calming technique when they're activated. We see pre and post a shift from 44% to 69%. The next question asks, can you notice when your attention has been pulled away and return to the present moment? There's an increase here as well. And then this is so compelling. When we're in conflict with someone, we take time to fully understand their perspective. Again, a shift. It's helpful to have these practices and know that we can train up these capacities. Imagine the shift that would take place in the world if these skills were taught in every classroom. Imagine the shift that would take place in your own life, in your home, in your work, if these skills were part of all of your team members' capacities, right? So our summary here is that we need these skills for 21st century, for living in our VUCA world, and that mindfulness is just moving from autopilot to aware, okay? So we've got mindfulness as our foundation. We have this awareness, and we can start building the capacity for self-awareness then. We're now going to move into empathy, which is really social awareness, right? We know that understanding someone else's feelings and perspectives is really important, and we don't need to actually measure that. I think we probably all have a sense of how important that is. And so what's interesting to know is empathy is also foundational for teamwork and collaboration, right? Whether you're in a school, a nonprofit, a government agency, if you want strong, deeply collaborative teams, empathy is key. And so here's an interesting research study that was done by Google actually, back in, I believe it was 2012. They were looking at what makes the perfect team. And this is Google. So they used all of their analytic capabilities. They surveyed 180 different teams, and they were looking for the factors that contributed to outstanding teamwork. And they had hypotheses, maybe it's a mix of backgrounds, or maybe it's directed managerial style, whether it's more directive or collaborative, but none of their hypotheses bore out. What they found was the number one contributor to teamwork was something called psychological safety. Please raise your hand if you're familiar with the idea, the concept, or practice of psychological safety. Yep, thanks, Andy. Yeah, a couple people heard of it. Good, right? Are we comfortable enough to take risks on a team, to speak up, to share our ideas without feeling insecure or embarrassed? That's pretty stunning. And at the same time, if we think about restorative practices and the work that we've learned from the wisdom of indigenous cultures, indigenous people, setting norms around restorative practices helps create the psychological safety that we need. So that is a stunning finding for many folks, for many teams. And it's interesting that Google did the study quite a while ago, but the US Surgeon General just released a framework. Has anyone seen this or read this yet? This came out in 2022, the Workplace Mental Health and Wellbeing Framework. And look at what is at the top of this framework. Protection from harm, safety, right? In the work that we do for inclusion, belonging, equitable workspaces where we celebrate diversity, this is rising to the top as the number one thing that we need to ensure. How do we build this for our teams? We build this through the capacity of building our emotional intelligence. So empathy is clearly something that we would like, and it's important for working together. Why is it so hard for us to bring empathy into our team meetings, into our relationships? What is going on there? What keeps us from understanding each other and deeply collaborating? Well, we can go back and review our autopilot traits. We can get into these habits of behavior and just keep kind of moving forward with our relationships without pausing to think about what it is that we can bring differently to the table. So If mindfulness is this mental exercise that helps us move from autopilot to aware, empathy is building on this capacity to be aware of other people, okay? Awareness of other people, their emotions, their perspectives, that they are human beings first before they are colleagues. They are human beings first before they are students, right? It's powerful. It's powerful. So we're going to move into our last communication exercise of the morning, but we're first going to recognize some autopilot habits we might have around unmindful listening. If we're not aware, if we're unmindful when we're talking with someone, we're not truly able to connect. And there are some characteristics of unmindful listening, and we all do it at times, especially when we're holding on to these and they're buzzing and dinging at us. When we're unmindfully listening, we're trying to multitask, our attention is elsewhere, we're thinking about ourselves, our default mode network is active, we're trying to think about what we want to say when it's our turn to talk, we're offering advice or solutions, we might even be interrupting, right? So the first practice that we're going to offer around mindful listening is something called shift to connect. This is another portable micro practice that you can bring with you when you know that you want to fully connect with another human being. 3 breaths again. The first breath is to settle the mind. You might be walking into a conversation and you are dreading it and you have thoughts about the other person. You want to notice and settle those thoughts. Remind ourselves of a similarity. This is another human being who just wants to be happy. Human being first. And the third breath is to offer a kindness. May you be happy. May you feel safe in our meeting together, right? This is such a powerful practice. There's a couple that is like, we have a couple friends and this is a friend of them. This couple is not our immediate friendship. So Raymond is the husband, and for years, whenever we'd get together and I knew Raymond was going to be there, I'd start in with my wife. Oh my gosh, don't let me get stuck talking to Raymond. He makes me crazy. He's always this, he's always that, right? I learned this practice and I put it to use. We're going to a party. Raymond's going to be there. And I sat and I did this. I'm going to settle my mind. All right. I'm judging. I'm making assumptions. See a similarity. Raymond just wants to be heard and understood. He's a fellow human being who wants to be happy. And I offered a kindness. I did that right before I saw Raymond, and it shifted something so that I could actually ask questions with interest. And we had a very different conversation. I learned a lot about him. So it's so simple. And I think the power is in its simplicity. So it's something you can take with you. Okay, good. We're good on time. So Beth is going to start setting us up in dyads for our mindful listening exercise. Okay, this is going to be a specific protocol that might feel awkward, and that's okay because it's practicing a new skill potentially for some of us. Mindful listening. And here's how it's going to work. It'll be a 6-minute breakout room, and you'll be in dyads. And person A, when it's your turn to talk, I'm going to give you prompts in a moment. And when it's your turn to talk, you will have 2 minutes of uninterrupted airtime. And you don't have to talk the entire time. You can pause, you can gather your thoughts, you can think, you can sit in silence. But you'll have 2 minutes to respond to some prompts I'll show you. Person B, as the listener, this is your chance, your time and space to give the gift of your full attention. You are looking and nodding and smiling, and really the intention is understanding and connection. Okay, you may not speak, person B. Just notice how that goes. Autopilot, we're generally talking quite a bit. So this is the invitation. After 2 minutes, you'll switch roles and person B will be the speaker. And then you'll have a free flow conversation to talk about how was that? How was that exercise? How might it be useful? These are the prompts you'll have. What's surprising in my life lately? What kind of person do I want to be? Or anything else that's on your mind. Okay. If all goes well with technology, you will see these slides in the breakout room. You'll go to your breakout room. You'll see shift to connect. I'll pause here and give you 3 breaths, and then you'll see this slide. I noticed that my 2-minute timer didn't work last time. Let's hope it works. But person A, you can be the person whose name comes first in the alphabet. You begin talking for 2 minutes. You can take pauses. Person B, do not speak. Notice how that is. Then you'll see a prompt to shift. And then person B, it'll be your turn to talk for 2 minutes. And person A, you get to practice this very important skill, gift of your full attention, do not speak. 2 more minutes will go by, and then you'll have a free flow conversation. How was it? How might this be helpful in my life, right? Any observations? So step out of the conversation and consider how that was. If there's a group of 3, the third person, you can use this time to actually share, and the other 2 people will be your mindful listeners. Okay. I'm going to get us set up here. So Beth, are they already there?
I think I may have sent them early, so I apologize if you did not hear all of the instructions. There's a few of us still here, though.
Do you have a sense of how much time they? Oh wow, they've been at it for a while.
Yep. So I actually went out and thought it was a quirk and then came back. And I heard all the instructions, but I think everybody stayed back in the rooms.
Okay,
Oh, I am so sorry, you all.
that's okay.
No worries.
I was in a group as well, and then the person left. So then I was like, well, I'm only here by myself. So I came back.
Welcome back.
You were probably with me, Samantha. Sorry about that.
No, it was Jerry.
Oh, okay. So do you want to give it a shot? You want to be person A?
Oh, go for it. I'm about to, yeah, there's 2 minutes left. So go for it. One of you can give it a shot. I love that.
Let's see. I can't see you yet. Oh. So I'll just talk then. I'm good at that. So what kind of person do I want to be? I think this last decade, I've really been focused on school. Before I just finished my PhD and I was all in. And then during that time, I got 10 years older. I packed on a few pounds and just kind of let my, physical person and kind of be set aside for the moment. And so the person that I'm aspiring to be is to go back to that former, maybe not that former marathon runner, but definitely somebody that was more grounded in the here and now, but also in listening to my body, stepping away from the computer, listening to myself. When my body's screaming for a walk, not reach for the chips and things like that. It might sound easy, but it's definitely been a struggle. And so that's what I have been working on for the last probably about year. I'm doing okay, but always can be better. And I have 50 seconds more to go. I'm not used to talking about me. Got nothing else. Anybody else want to go?
Samantha, you want to say something for the last 30 seconds or so? Thanks for your share, Rachel. Thanks for swerving with us. Yeah.
My
And good for
pleasure.
you. Yeah. All right. And I think we're about, yeah, they're going to come out right now.
Thank you, Samantha.
Okay. Welcome back. Here they come. Yeah. Okay. So as promised, we had a technology glitch. Thank you for your patience around that. Really wanting to open up the room for a couple minutes. This idea, I'm not sure how much of the directions you heard. I know that we got whisked away to breakout rooms a little early. The idea being that as a mindful listener, you are not speaking, you are holding space, resisting the urge to make it about yourself, offer advice. So just opening up, did anyone have a chance to explore not talking and giving full space? And what did you notice during that exercise. You can also put it in the chat. Peace. Monica says peace. Thanks, Monica. Apprehension. Thank you, Mr. Jesse Cuff. Yeah, apprehension. As the speaker or the listener, Jesse, do you feel like you can say a few words? No pressure. As the listener. As the listener. So we can find some discomfort, some apprehension if we're not talking. Yeah. As the speaker, probably might feel awkward. Someone said, I don't speak this much about myself uninterrupted, right? Anyone want to? Informed, says Karen. So you learn something about the other person, right? Yeah, thanks. Anyone else? Connected, says Adrian. Connected, says Maria. Yeah, okay. Thank you for the reflection. So the idea here, the takeaway is that you can set this intention to hold space for someone and look at your autopilot responses and really lean into what is it like to listen, to understand. This is so important for our relationships. To feel heard and understood is to start the healing process. So if you're in relationship with a child, colleague, a family member, it's hardest for me to practice with my mother, because I always want to correct her, but it's a new skill maybe for some of us that we can take into our relationships, and it makes a gigantic difference. And if you start doing this, people are going to ask you what's wrong. Why aren't you talking? What's wrong, right? Every time we change our communication patterns, people will notice. And it's a behavior that we bring into our relationships. Okay, so as we wrap up, hope you can't see this. The idea here is that we can move from autopilot to aware. And when we start developing this capacity for awareness, it develops connection. We need to be aware of ourselves and our behavior so that we can then connect with other people, right? With empathy. Our practices that we've looked at today, I'll just pause and let you read. Some dedicated practices, some integrated practices. And our summary is just, hey, we're human beings in the 21st century. We need to level up our skills, right? I'm so hopeful because some schools, and it's very controversial, you may have heard some of the controversy around the country, there are schools that are teaching mindfulness, they're teaching this mental fitness, and they're teaching social emotional learning. We need it in our works and in our workplaces for the deep collaboration that is required. We don't have time for relationship issues in our teams, do we? We have deep, important work to do. So we need these skills for a VUCA world. Mindfulness is simply an exercise that helps us move from autopilot to aware. This awareness creates connection and empathy with other people as human beings first, working through this world that we're living in. We show up and we're humans first, and that we can find these ways to practice that are both dedicated and integrated. Okay, so just as a brief reflection in the chat, if you would, you are invited to write this sentence and fill in the blanks for you. If you've had an aha today, something sparked your interest. I used to think listening was about waiting for my turn. Now I think listening is about understanding, whatever it is. And let's just see if we can have some inspiration from each other. I used to think blank, but now I think blank. I used to think knowing someone well with mental health challenges would not be 100% of people. Yeah, right? It's pretty ubiquitous. Sam, I used to think mindfulness was just for myself. Now I think I have to incorporate these types of practices in all of my classes. Thank you, Sam. Yeah, Adrian, I used to think mindfulness was about breathing in the body. I now think you can apply it in many different ways, especially if we're going to be trauma sensitive. Thinking about the breath or working out with the breath is not helpful for everyone. All of my classes, good. I used to think multitasking was helpful to getting everything done, but now I think this is just an excuse to not be in the moment, right? Thank you for that. I used to think emotional intelligence was what you were born with. Now it's something we can develop. Yes. I used to think it was easy to be a manager. Now I see how challenging it can be, right? I used to think mindfulness took a while, but now I think it can just take a couple breaths. Samantha, that's something that we hear a lot of school teachers using and finding and reporting is very impactful for them. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I used to think mindfulness did not fit with my schedule, but now I think it will. Thanks, Maria. Okay. All right. I'm going to take us to the end. I want to make sure we know how to stay in touch. Thank you for your thought and your reflection. And next steps. Oops. Next steps. Yeah. Let's stay in touch. I am so passionate about this work. And I think what's compelling for me is that we have the tools and the science we need to promote mental fitness. And this mental fitness is really foundational for the work that we have to do in the world. It's foundational for DEI work, for restorative practice work. And so if you're interested in becoming a thought partner, I would love to hear what you're up to in the world, how this might look in your world. If you're ever in Asheville and you want to get a coffee, please let me know as well. I'm going to put some information here into the chat. I'm going to give you my email and my LinkedIn. And if you email me, I'm going to give you a couple helpful resources as well. I've referenced the 2022 Surgeon General report. I can give you a link to that. I can give you the Search Inside Yourself Impact Report, and then a couple more tools, videos that you can use. I've got videos of a minute to arrive that you can use in your team meetings if you want to explore that with your teams, even your families at the dinner table, and a video of the 3 breaths practice, okay? And the slides, of course. So with that, I'm going to lead us through a 3 breath practice to finish. If anyone wants to stay after this and have some more Q&A, we can do that. I realized we didn't get to have time for that. So I'm going to close us out with the 3 breaths, and then please stick around if you want to chat some more. So 3 breaths as you transition to whatever's next in your day. The first breath, feel your breath in your body. The next breath, relax any part of your body where you notice tension. And your third breath, just ask yourself, what's most important now? Who are you going to connect with next, and what can you bring to that conversation? What's important? Okay. I thank you for your kind attention. You can unmute and ask any questions or share any comments, observations that you would like to. We'll hang on for a few minutes. And Kendra, I will see you as soon as we're done with this, okay? All right, thank you. Thanks, Renee. Thank you.